Mr. Mesereau.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just very briefly, you and Evan hired attorneys and tried to negotiate a financial settlement before you ever talked to any police officer, right?
No.
You were negotiating for money before you ever reported anything to any police officer in Los Angeles, correct?
Not correct.
Do you know the dates you hired your attorneys?
After we spoke with the police.
You're saying that under oath?
That's what I believe, yes.
You don't know that for sure, do you?
I'm sure.
Your negotiations went on long before you ever went to any police officer in Los Angeles, true?
False.
Do you know when you first went to any police officer?
After the police, after we spoke to the police.
It was after you spoke to Larry Feldman on a number of visits, correct?
Not correct.
It was actually Larry Feldman who contacted the police, wasn't it?
No.
You didn't talk to any prosecutor in Los Angeles before you retained Gloria Allred, correct?
Yes, correct.
You didn't talk to any police officer in Los Angeles before retaining Gloria Allred, correct?
Can you backtrack a bit? Can you?
You retained Gloria Allred before you ever contacted any police officer in Los Angeles, true?
Not true.
Who did you contact in the LAPD before you hired Gloria Allred?
The police department. LAPD.
You didn't give any police statement before negotiations had already begun to settle the case, true?
Not correct.
Did you call them yourself?
Did I call?
The police yourself?
Department of Children's Services.
How about police?
No, Department of Children's Services.
I'm asking you about the police.
It's argumentative, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You were negotiating for money.
Just a minute.
Oh, pardon me.
All right, she did answer it before the objection. Go ahead. Counsel, next question.
You said you contacted Department of Children's Services, correct?
Yes.
That's not the police department, is it?
That's argumentative, Your Honor. And assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained. Argumentative.
And you contacted Department of Children's Services after first talking to a lawyer, true?
Not correct.
In fact, you personally never called the police department, ever, about anything involving Mr. Jackson, true?
True.
When did you first hire Gloria Allred?
After we spoke to the district attorney.
When did you first hire Larry Feldman?
After the police were notified. Department of Children's Services, and Lauren Weiss, the district attorney.
Your strategy was to negotiate a settlement before ever contacting law enforcement, true?
No strategy, sorry.
And one of the levers you were trying to hang over Mr. Jackson was bad publicity if he didn't pay, right?
Incorrect.
Okay, when you talked to Mr. Sneddon, did he ever show you the dates when you contacted your first lawyer in this case?
No.
When you talked to Mr. Sneddon, did he ever show you the dates before any contact was ever made to a police officer?
No.
Do you know when your civil case was first filed?
I'm not sure of the exact date.
Do you know who filed it?
I'm not exactly sure, sorry.
Okay, do you know when you first contacted Department of Children's Services?
Sometime in August.
You don't know when you hired Gloria Allred, correct?
Correct.
Do you know if Gloria Allred contacted Department of Children's Services?
I don't know that.
Do you know when Evan first hired Barry Rothman?
I do not know that.
He hired Barry Rothman before any report was made to DCFS, correct?
I don't know.
I'm going to object. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
When did you first hire attorney Michael Freeman?
Object is asked and answered.
I believe she said she didn't know.
Okay, no further questions.
All right.
Mrs. Chandler, do you know whether or not in Los Angeles, that the Los Angeles Police Department has sworn peace officers attached to the Child Abuse Unit in the Department of Child Services?
Correct.
Sorry?
Yes, I do.
Were those the people that you talked to when you were interviewed?
Yes, they were.
And do you have a recollection at this present time as to specifically when in August you interviewed with them?
Specifically, no.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you a document about that interview?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
With regard to, I'm sorry, to when you were interviewed by members of the Los Angeles Police Department?
Yes, it does.
And what was the date on that?
The 7th of August 93.
Now, let's go back, if we can. And just to clarify, you were not the one who originally made the report.
Correct.
Do you know who did, of your own knowledge?
Of my knowledge, it was Jordan Chandler, my son.
Now, let's go back for just a second. Mr. Mesereau asked you about a meeting on Saturday involving your attorney and myself. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And was there also another person that was present with us that I brought along?
Yes.
Do you remember the person's name?
No, I don't remember his name, but he was a detective.
With the sheriff's department?
With the sheriff's department.
So he was also present during that entire meeting?
He was, absolutely, yes.
All right. Now, he also asked you about conversations that you and I had on the phone. Do you recall that?
Correct.
And that we had talked a couple of times on the phone?
Correct.
And with regard to those conversations, the first conversation we had, do you recall the substance of that conversation?
That I would be subpoenaed and for testifying.
And did I indicate to you that I wanted to talk to you, to do an interview with you?
That we would be speaking later on, yes.
Okay. And did you have to check with somebody to make sure that was okay because of the confidentiality agreement?
Yes.
And who was that?
Larry Feldman.
So is that one of the phone calls that you had with Mr. Feldman, was to make sure?
Yes.
To make sure it was okay for you to talk to me?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Mesereau asked you about some countersuit that Michael Jackson alleged against you and members of your family. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
Did you ever pay a penny to Mr. Jackson in any lawsuit to settle anything?
No.
Now, you indicated that these two children from New Jersey that you mentioned, the Cassios. Do you remember the name of the restaurant in New Jersey that they allegedly owned?
Aldo's Restaurant.
You talked with Mr. Mesereau about the incident that occurred in New York where the lamps got broken and the karate kicks and all that?
Correct.
Okay. Did you subsequently learn that the version of what happened was not truthful?
Objection. Leading.
Correct.
Sustained. The answer's stricken.
Did you subsequently, can you tell us how you eventually, let me put it this way, did you ultimately learn other information about that incident?
Yes.
You personally?
Yes.
And did you determine from that information that the original version wasn't correct?
Correct.
We talked a little bit in your direct examination about the change in custody agreement that Mr. Jackson asked you to sign. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you did sign it?
I did.
Now, after having signed that document, did you ever get custody of your child back?
No.
Mr. Mesereau asked you about your son Jordan and about some things you may or may not have seen with regard to taking showers. And I want to ask you a few questions about that, okay?
Yes.
During the time that you stayed at Neverland Valley Ranch, and your son slept in Mr. Jackson's room. Okay. Did you ever see your son come back to the guest cottages to take showers?
No.
During the time that your son was in Monaco and stayed in Mr. Jackson's room for several days in a row, did you ever see your son come back to take showers in your room?
No.
During the time that you were in Florida and Mr. Jackson and your son spent the time together and he was sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room, did you ever see your son come back to your room to take showers or to clean up?
No.
And if I were to ask you that same question with regard to baths, okay, would there be any different answers?
No.
Or with regard to seeing your son getting dressed in the morning, would there be any different answers?
No.
Now, with regard to the meeting that Mr. Mesereau talked about, Where you were at the hideout. Mr. Jackson's hideout, the Century City place, in Century City? I don't know where it is.
Yes, it is.
And we're talking about the evening that you described where Mr. Pellicano was talking to Jordan downstairs and you were upstairs with David Schwartz.
Correct.
You told us that lasted about 45 minutes?
Yes, it did.
Do you recall whether or not Mr. Jackson was present during that conversation?
I don't recall him being there.
Now, if I show you your statement that you gave to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, might that refresh your recollection to that event?
Yes.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Page 90, Counsel.
Thank you.
Does having seen that statement refresh your recollection as to whether or not Mr. Jackson was present with Mr. Pellicano during Jordan's conversation or interview?
Yes, it does.
And was he?
Yes, he was present.
You told the jury that it's been 11 years since you've had any conversations with your son Jordan, correct?
Correct.
Is that by your choice?
No.
You told the jury that as a result of the conversation with Mr. Jackson in Las Vegas where he urged you to trust him, okay?
Yes. I'll be okay, thank you.
That during that conversation in Las Vegas where Mr. Jackson urged you to trust him, do you recall that?
I do.
Do you regret ever doing that?
Very much so.
Nothing further.
Briefly, do you recall Evan hired counsel in June to start negotiating with Mr. Jackson?
No, I don't recall.
Do you recall being in any meetings with Evan and his counsel in June to try and settle the matter?
No.
Do you recall Mr. Pellicano making settlement offers to Evan on your behalf in June?
No, I don't.
Do you recall any contact between Evan and lawyers in May?
No.
Okay. You never discussed that with Evan at the time?
No.
Didn't you have a lot of, we're talking about 1993. Didn't you have a lot of contact with Evan at that point about hiring counsel?
No.
And weren't you in a dispute with Evan at that point over custody?
Yes.
Okay. And when did that dispute begin, if you know?
In August of 93.
But you had had problems with Evan for months before that, had you not?
Not terrible.
And you don't know when he hired his attorney?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay. No further questions.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You may step down. Call your next witness.
People called Dwayne Swingler.
When you get to the witness stand, please face the clerk and raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Dwayne Swingler. Dwayne, Swingler, Swingler.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Swingler.
Good afternoon.
What is your current occupation, sir?
Right now I do stand-in work, movie sets.
Okay. And what kind of stand-in work? What does that?
Stand in for stars. It's called second team. They don't use the stars to get the lights bright. They use stand-ins.
I see. During the year 2003, at some point during that year, were you employed by Michael Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Is he the man seated to my right with the long black hair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. When did you begin working for Mr. Jackson?
In June of 2003. Early June of 2003.
And what was your assignment for Mr. Jackson?
Supervisor of Neverland.
How did you come to get that position?
I met Michael at a studio, Marvin Gaye's studio in Hollywood.
What were you doing at the studio?
My cousin was engineering Michael's music session, and Michael needed someone to whistle on a track, so my cousin called me and said, "Would you like to come down and whistle on Michael's track?" And I said, "I can't whistle that well, but I would love to come down and meet Michael Jackson."
Okay. Are you yourself a musician?
Yes, I am.
And you met Mr. Jackson on that date?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me was that in 2003?
Yes, it was.
About what month was it, if you recall?
That was probably early, sometime in April.
And how did it come about that you were offered employment?
I hung out at the studio with Michael and his kids, and Chris Carter, maybe 4, 5 days in a row, 3, 4 days in a row, while they were working on the session.
Who did you understand Chris Carter to be?
Michael's personal security.
And so somebody offered you employment?
On the last day there, Chris Carter asked me to come outside. So I walked outside with him, and at that time he told me that, Michael likes you. He would love to bring you aboard. What are you currently doing right now?
Were you available?
Yes.
Did they tell you what type of job they wanted to hire you for?
Initially they hired me to be security, along with Chris Carter, to travel with Michael.
And how did that work out?
Well, that didn't work for me because I had triplets. I got 3-year-old triplet boys, so.
Alright, so traveling wasn't an option?
No, actually, Michael was the one who said, if he has triplet boys, then I don't want him to be traveling with me all the time.
So you said you became ranch manager?
Yes.
How did that come about?
I guess Michael suggested to Chris, if he has triplets, he'll be away from his kids a lot. So maybe we should offer him another job, and that's when supervisor of Neverland came up.
So who offered you that position, I guess is my question.
I guess Michael, but Chris Carter's the one who told me about the position.
At some time did you discuss with Mr. Jackson personally your employment?
I don't understand the question.
Did you ever have a discussion with Mr. Jackson about your employment as ranch manager?
Yes, I did.
Did he ever discuss with you the terms by which you could be terminated if he was dissatisfied with your work?
He didn't discuss with me personally. But Chris Carter and Joe Marcus did.
And did you have an understanding about how you could be terminated?
Yes.
And what was that?
Grounds of giving up information of where Michael Jackson's whereabouts are, and, there was a rule on the ranch. I don't know if it came directly from Michael, but, Chris told me and Joe Marcus told me as well, that you can never say no.
Objection. Hearsay.
Okay, let's just back up a minute. I think what my question is, did you have some indication from Mr. Jackson as to who had authority to terminate you?
Yes.
And who was that?
From my understanding, it was only supposed to be Michael Jackson.
Okay. At some point during 2003, were you terminated?
Yes.
Tell me about that. How did that come about?
I had.
Objection. Vague as to time.
I'll ask you to clarify the time.
Okay. When were you terminated?
Early August 2003.
And how long had you been working at that point for Mr. Jackson?
Maybe 5, 6 weeks.
When did you start work?
I was hired in the end of April, early May. But I had to go back to Michigan for a couple of weeks, so the hiring process took a while. Background checks, physicals.
When did you start going to Neverland?
In May.
In May?
Yeah.
And when did you start getting a paycheck?
In June.
Okay. And what were you doing there in May?
I just came out to the ranch to check things out to see the position that I would be, filling.
In May, was it understood that you would be the ranch manager?
Yes.
And did you go up there and receive some instruction from anybody as to what the duties were in May?
I received, sort of from Joe Marcus, some instruction, but not as much as I did once I started in June.
What was Mr. Marcus's assignment at that time?
Ranch manager.
So he was ranch manager and you were going to take it over?
No, ranch manager. You deal with the majority of the workers outside, the garden, the landscapers, things like that. The carnival, the festival, whatever.
What was Joe Marcus doing?
What do you mean?
Well, you said Joe Marcus was ranch manager.
Right, that was his position. Ranch manager, you deal with all the employees basically outside of the house.
And your position was going to be?
Supervisor. Deal with the employees and Michael and the kids in the house.
Oh, in the house?
Yes.
So house manager?
House manager.
Alright, good. So you began work in June, but you went up there for how many weeks to get some training?
Not really training, just sort of to come check things out, and to see what position I would be taking and where the office was, and things like that.
And when was it you were terminated?
In early August.
And how did that come about?
I had a meeting with Michael about transferring my position. And I liked working for him. I wanted to work for him somewhere in Los Angeles, because my triplets were only 1 year old at the time. So I was missing them being in Los Angeles and me being here, and me staying the night at Neverland often. Wasn't working for me, so I had a one-on-one meeting with him to be transferred.
And how did your termination come about? Let me ask you this, were you terminated?
Yes, I was.
And how were you terminated?
I was terminated by Joe Marcus. I arrived at Neverland one morning for work and he told me he had changed the locks on me. And then I went into, one of my employees in the house told me Joe came to change the locks. And I said, why? And they said, I don't know. And I had already been told by the guard at the gate that Joe.
Objection. Hearsay.
Sustained.
So the locks were changed. Did you go talk to Mr. Marcus?
Yes, I did.
What did he tell you?
Objection. Hearsay.
He told.
I can go back to my last question, I guess. I'll withdraw that question, Your Honor.
All right.
And how specifically, I want you to go directly to the answer on this question. How specifically did you learn that you were terminated?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Go ahead.
I learned directly from Joe Marcus that my services would no longer be needed at Neverland, and that he didn't have to give me a reason. Because
You asked him for a reason?
Yes, I did. I didn't think I had done anything wrong. Well, I know I hadn't done anything wrong.
Okay, so you'd been at Neverland for a little over a month, and you'd worked there for a few weeks before that time as well?
Well, not worked. But I wasn't getting paid for that time. That was just to come out there and check the ranch out.
During the time that you were at Neverland, did you have personal interaction with Michael Jackson?
Yes.
On how often a basis?
If he was there. All the time, if he was there.
More than once a day?
Yes.
And who was responsible for handling Mr. Jackson's appointments while he was on the ranch?
At Neverland, I would take all the phone calls. It didn't matter who it was calling. Mother, father, business person.
So if he had an appointment for a day, would you take that? Would that be part of your duties?
Yes.
To schedule those appointments?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to observe visitors of Mr. Jackson that were child visitors?
Yes.
Did you see child visitors spend the night at Neverland?
Yes.
Did you see child visitors spend the night in Mr. Jackson's room?
Yes.
Objection. Leading. And violates the court's order.
Sustained.
Who did you see visit Mr. Jackson who was a child visitor?
I'm going to object. Violates the court's order.
Sustained.
When you were at Neverland, did you interact with Mr. Jackson about issues dealing with activities on the ranch?
Objection. Vague.
Overruled.
Issues dealing with activity on the ranch?
Well, whatever, let's back up. What were your duties as house manager?
To answer all the phone calls. To, schedule the maids. To help the maids out with cleaning rooms and suites. And basically to, take care of whatever Michael and the kids needed.
And in terms of the day-to-day issues in terms of running the ranch, can you characterize how? Mr. Jackson's degree of involvement?
As far as,
Objection. Vague. And relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Mr. Jackson is in total charge of the ranch.
Why do you say that?
Well, when I was terminated, because of my previous conversation with Chris Carter that only Michael Jackson could terminate me, I called Evie, which is Michael's personal assistant.
Objection. Non-responsive. Hearsay.
That's fine.
And relevant as to time.
Sustained.
So when you were on the ranch, did you have occasion to see Mr. Jackson in terms of making orders at the ranch?
Yes.
Did he make orders?
Yes. He made some to me.
Continuing relevance objection, Your Honor, as to time.
Time?
During the time that you were ranch manager, during that 5-week period.
Yes.
That's the objection, Your Honor. The time period's irrelevant.
All right. That's overruled.
Go ahead. You can answer that question.
Yes, I observed it. He made some to me personally.
Did you have occasion to see individuals, his other employees, in terms of their relationship with Mr. Jackson?
Meaning like Joe Marcus and Grace and those?
I mean, let's talk about your employees. Did you have employees that were working under you as house manager?
Yes.
Who?
Cooks?
Yeah, just generally speaking.
Cooks, housekeepers, maids.
Okay. And had some of these people been working at the ranch longer than you had?
Yes. The majority of, all of them.
And did you have occasion to see their interaction with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And what level of service did Mr. Jackson expect?
Objection. Relevance. Vague. No foundation.
It's vague. Sustained.
Can you characterize the demeanor of the employees around Mr. Jackson when they were in his presence?
Objection. Vague. Relevance. Particularly the time period.
I'll be specific. During the time you were ranch manager or house manager.
Same objection.
Overruled.
Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah. My question is, can you characterize the demeanor? How did these people act, these employees, when they were around Mr. Jackson in his presence?
I mean, they act like they liked him. Mr. Jackson was nice to people.
Did they act like they'd speak their mind around him?
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Did they act comfortable around him?
Objection. Leading. Vague. Relevance, and foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know if Mr. Jackson would fire people at Neverland?
Objection. Foundation. Relevance.
Foundation. Sustained.
Well, you yourself were fired, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know who fired you?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Who? When you were working with Mr. Jackson, did you have occasion to see individuals who were employees of his that were closer than other employees?
Objection. Vague. Leading. Relevance. Foundation.
Objection. Counsel's fishing for a reason to object to that question.
I object to the colloquy. Move to strike.
All sustain the vague objection to that question.
Did you see any employees that spent more time with Mr. Jackson than other employees?
Objection. Leading. Vague. Foundation, and relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, I did.
Did you see, well, let's go ahead and make a list. Who did you see that spent more time with Mr. Jackson than other employees?
Objection. Relevance. Foundation. Vague.
Overruled. You may answer.
Grace, I'm sorry. Grace, Chris Carter. Those are the two that I think spent most of the time with Mr. Jackson.
Did you ever see an individual visit the ranch by the name of Dieter Weisner?
I would have to see a picture to be sure.
Could we approach, Your Honor? We'd like a proffer.
Be happy to make one.
I don't really need that. It's clear to me where.
I show you People's Exhibit number 17, Mr. Swingler. Can you identify that for me, please?
I can't say I've seen that gentleman.
You haven't seen him?
No.
Did you previously have a conversation with Detective Bonner about the facts of this case?
Yes, sir.
And in that conversation, did you identify, just a moment, if you would, please. Did you identify a number of individuals that you thought were within Michael Jackson's inner circle?
Objection. Leading. And vague.
It's impeachment.
Sustained.
I'm sorry?
It's vague.
Did you identify Dieter Weisner as a member of Michael Jackson's inner circle?
Objection. Leading. And foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
In my conversation with Detective Bonner?
With Detective Bonner, did you not identify Dieter Weisner specifically as a member of Michael Jackson's inner circle?
I can't really recall, because I don't know the face. I never seen the face before. The name I know, the face I don't.
Do you know the name Dieter Weisner?
Yes.
Did you meet a man by the name of Dieter Weisner?
Looking at the face.
I'm not asking you about the face.
Objection. He's arguing with the witness. Leading and foundation.
Overruled.
Did you meet a man by the name of Dieter Weisner?
I can't remember.
Did you meet a man, well?
Like I say, the name sounds familiar. I know I've heard the name. Maybe I spoke with him on the phone a few times there, but the face didn't.
Objection. Calls for speculation. Move to strike. Non-responsive.
Did you meet a man by the name of Ronald Konitzer?
There's an objection pending.
Judge, can you turn the microphone on?
All right. The objection is overruled. And you had another question. Go ahead.
Did you meet a man by the name of Ronald Konitzer?
I can't, by the name. I would have to see a picture.
Did you meet two German businessmen?
Yes.
Did they meet with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
3 or 4.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examine?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Tom Mesereau. I speak for Mr. Jackson.
How you doing, sir?
Good, good. We've never spoken before, right?
No.
You worked for a 5-week period?
4.5, 5 weeks, yes, sir.
4.5, 5 weeks. How many days a week did you work?
6 or 7.
And the prosecutor asked you about how many meetings Mr. Jackson had with two German individuals, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you really know how many meetings there were?
Around, I'm guessing, 3 to 4.
Okay. Move to strike the testimony, Your Honor.
Denied.
You're guessing 3 to 4, but you don't really know, right?
No, I couldn't say. I couldn't pinpoint it. I wasn't.
You weren't in the meetings, right?
No.
You don't remember what they looked like, right?
I do remember what they looked like if I saw a picture of them, yes.
Well, the picture the prosecutor showed you, you couldn't identify, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you wanted to be transferred to Los Angeles, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you tell, excuse me, who did you talk to about the transfer?
Mr. Jackson.
Okay. And you explained that the commute and the hours were just too much to raise your family?
I just wasn't seeing my kids, and they were 1 year old.
And did you ask Mr. Jackson to be transferred somewhere in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Okay. And where was that?
I just asked him to be transferred to any business in Los Angeles that he had.
But you really didn't even know if there was a job available in Los Angeles, right?
No, that's why I was asking.
Okay, right. Okay. And approximately when did you ask him? Do you know?
Maybe 3 weeks into the job.
Okay. And Mr. Jackson was always nice to you, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
And as far as you know, there may not have been a job available in Los Angeles, right?
He told me there was one.
He told you there was one?
Yes, sir.
Where did he say?
A&R, his record label.
Pardon me?
A&R of his record label.
Had you ever worked at a record label before?
No, I hadn't.
All right, but at some point you learned that you weren't being hired, right?
No. As a matter of fact, I saw Michael again at his birthday party in Los Angeles and he told me I was still hired.
Okay, but it never came through, right?
No, I'm still waiting for my paycheck now.
Okay, you're trying to write a book about your experiences at Neverland, correct?
Well, no, I'm not trying to write a book about my experiences at Neverland.
Well, didn't you? Excuse me. Did you say Michael Jackson has a record label?
He told me he had a record label.
Okay. Do you know that he doesn't have one?
Objection. Assumes facts.
Sustained.
Do you know whether or not he really has a record label?
I was just told by him he had a record label.
Okay. All right. Now, you prepared notes for a book called Entering Neverland, Secrets Behind the Gate, right?
Does it have my signature on it? Because I know that within the last month or two, I started jotting down information to myself and somehow my information come up missing out of my house, but whatever.
Did you prepare notes for a book titled Entering Neverland, Secrets Behind the Gate?
No.
By Dwayne Swingler, head supervisor of Neverland Ranch, summer of 2003, did you prepare that?
No.
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. The answer is no.
Are you aware of anything like that?
No.
You didn't.
Am I aware of it? What do you mean?
Yeah. Have you written out anything for a book called Entering Neverland, Secrets Behind the Gate, by Dwayne Swingler?
No, I haven't written anything, or titled anything, or signed anything, or spoke to anybody about. This is my deal.
Have you talked to a group called News of the World?
Have I?
Yes.
Yeah. I spoke with one lady one time, yes.
And to your knowledge, who is News of the World?
To my knowledge, it's a news media overseas.
And why were you speaking to them?
Because I was interested in maybe possibly writing down some information to cash in on something like everybody else was, because Michael wasn't. I hadn't received the paycheck from A&R at the time.
Okay. Did you enter into a non-disclosure agreement with News of the World?
No, I did not.
Have you ever seen one?
No, I did not.
Did you ever talk to someone named David Schmidt?
The same time I spoke with the News of the World lady, he's the one that contacted her and contacted me.
And to your knowledge, who is David Schmidt?
He said that he was a media agent. I don't even know how he got my phone number.
When did you last talk to David Schmidt?
As a matter of fact, he called me today.
And to your knowledge, is he with a public relations company?
I really don't know what he did. He never clarified that with me. He said he was an agent, he was a producer, he was in public relations. I basically ended the situation.
To your knowledge, did anyone ever send you a non-disclosure agreement regarding News of the World?
No, I haven't signed any non-disclosure agreements, and I haven't taken any money from anyone.
How many discussions have you had with David Schmidt?
3, 4, can't remember.
And when was the last one with him? Today?
He called me today, because he said he heard that I was coming to testify.
Okay. Have you ever put together any notes for a possible book on the computer?
Excuse me?
Have you ever put any notes for a possible book on your computer?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever written any notes out for a possible book?
I told you I jotted down some information on a piece of paper, and that's all I've done.
Did you ever ask any public relations person to put together a proposal for you?
No, I haven't.
But you're thinking of doing it, right, like everybody else?
Yes, I was thinking about doing it.
Okay. Have you ever seen, excuse me, has anyone ever brought to your attention that somebody has prepared notes for a possible book in your name?
David
Schmidt?
Yes.
Did he prepare them, to your knowledge?
He just said he received papers. I don't know, like I told you, I don't even know how he got my phone number.
Okay, if I showed you these papers, might it refresh your recollection about where they came from?
No, it probably wouldn't, because I never typed any papers or wrote out. The only thing I did was write down notes, jotted down notes on a piece of paper.
Okay, and that was about your experience during the 5 weeks at Neverland?
That was about my experience totally, not just the 5 weeks at Neverland. That was my experience with Michael's manager and everything.
Okay, did you ever write down on those notes the words, secrets behind the gate?
No, I did not.
Okay, did David Schmidt tell you how he got your name?
No, he did not.
Okay, did you ever ask him, why did you call me?
Well, actually, he started the conversation off, and he just, went straight to talking about a lot of money, so I was listening to him about a lot of money first.
Did he promise you a lot of money?
That's what he promised, yes.
Okay, how much money did he promise?
He never said figures. He just said, you can make a lot of money. Why aren't you telling anyone your story? That's what he said to me.
It's your understanding that he's located in Phoenix, Arizona?
Yes, that's where he said he's from.
Okay, did he ever tell you he was going to prepare a possible manuscript for you?
He asked me would I like him to, and I said no. Like I told you, I terminated the conversation when he told me what he wanted to do.
Okay, and did he want some scandal sheet about Michael, something like that?
Actually, he's for Michael. He's pro-Michael.
Did he want you to write something about Michael?
He wanted to speak on Michael's behalf, yes.
Okay, and how often, in those 3 conversations, Did you talk about money each time?
No, I did not.
Okay. Have you ever spoken to Miss Carol Maung, Maung, who is the U.S. editor of News of the World?
I spoke with her. I spoke with her when she was with David when I got there.
And did she fax you anything or email you anything?
Fax me anything or email me anything?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay, alright. When you were at Neverland working?
Yes.
You had no direct contact with any member of the Arvizo family, right?
The Arvizo family?
Yes.
No, sir.
That means you didn't have any contact with the Arvizos?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember meeting Dominic Cassio at Neverland?
Yes, sir.
And did you speak to him?
Often.
Okay. And to your knowledge, he's a father?
He's a father?
Yes.
I didn't know he was a father.
Okay. Did he ever talk to you about work he did?
Did Dominic ever talk to me about work he did?
Yeah.
Some work at the restaurant that his family owned.
Okay. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Counsel? Off-the-record discussion held at counsel table. Maybe we should approach. Your Honor, may we approach?
For what?
Concerning the materials that counsel is using to cross-examine the witness on.
All right. Discussion held off the record at sidebar.
If I could just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I think I can finish with this witness, Your Honor. Just one question. Mr. Swingler, do you know if David Schmidt has any affiliation with Michael Jackson?
I just know that he has a website. That he's, pro Michael Jackson.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have another witness?
To Mr. Sneddon, go ahead. You. Do you want me to do it? Laughter. We're trying to figure out which one of us should take responsibility for telling you, no. Laughter. And being the great delegator I am, I'm leaving it up to Gordon. We have no further witnesses, Your Honor. We just anticipated that there would be. It would take a little longer to get through these witnesses today.
All right. There's a couple of items that we can take up. I'll go ahead and excuse the jury. To the jury, remember the admonitions I've given you and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30. But it's a half day tomorrow, remember. How could you forget, right? All right. First, there was. My understanding is that the special master will have the report available tomorrow morning for you on the computer hard drives.
On both of them, Your Honor?
Yes. They're working on some last-minute details. So it will be available tomorrow morning.
Now, at that point, then, Your Honor, does it need to go to you for final decision, or is that the decision?
I don't know. I haven't read the report. I was handed a rough draft of one by my research attorney this morning. Well, not this morning, a few minutes ago. And I asked him to talk to Mr. Sanger about an issue. So I can't answer your question.
Okay.
I suspect it doesn't need to go beyond what's been done by the special master, so.
Okay.
But I won't know till I've looked at it. The second thing is that both of you have submitted points and authorities on Janet Arvizo. The district attorneys I've read. And I just received the defense, so I haven't had time to read yours. When do you expect to call Janet Arvizo?
Either tomorrow or Wednesday. Depending on if we finish the witnesses scheduled before her tomorrow. If not,
they can't hear behind you. To the audience, he said either tomorrow or Wednesday.
As early as tomorrow.
As early as tomorrow. Okay. Well, I'm not really prepared to deal with that issue. We'll have to deal with it before she's called. But I'll need to study the material you've given me. The defense has given me.
Thank you.
Was there anything else pending?
On that issue, Your Honor, as I explained to your clerk, we were served with their papers this morning. We thought they might call Ms. Arvizo today.
Right.
So we put something together very quickly, and I would like to have an opportunity to explain to the court a little more, in a little more organized fashion, where this goes, now that we've had a few more minutes to think about it.
I'll make sure you have that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then we'll recess until tomorrow morning.